My name is Heather. I'm an addict. I'm very grateful to be here today, and I'm just going to tell you a short story about how I met my sponsee, Britt. She took me to meetings when I was a newcomer. I lived at a halfway house, and she came and she would pick some of the girls up and take us to meetings. I thought she was really cool when I met her, but then I didn't see her anymore. And the next time I saw her was when I signed up for an H&I panel at the Porter County Jail. And she was in there. And, she was in a pretty bad state, and I told my story to her, and she was on her way to DOC. And so again, I didn't see her anymore for a while. She was in a pretty bad spot when I had seen her in the jail. And I was sitting at a Tuesday night meeting in Porter County one day, and she came around the corner, and I saw her again, and we didn't know each other that well, but I remember giving her one of the biggest hugs I probably ever gave somebody because I was just grateful to see her at a meeting. And that night she asked me to sponsor her, and I've been her sponsor for a couple years now. How many years? 4? 4 years now. I watched her change and grow into one of the most amazing women that I've ever met. She's my only sponsee that has ever worked all 12 steps. And yes, it is a 12-step program, so you have to do that. She sponsors many women, and she just is all around. She does a bunch of service work, and the one thing that I value about her the most is she is pretty much willing to help out anyone when they ask. She's one of the most humble women that I've met, and I am just grateful to have her in my life, so here she is.
Hi, I'm Britt. I'm an addict. I really wasn't that nervous till I got up here. This is up high. I really can't see anybody's face too well, so that's good. Thank you, Heather. I love you. I remember meeting Heather like that, and I struggled for a long time to get clean. I grew up in an alcoholic family. I took my first drink when I was 12. That was really the first thing I ever picked up. And then it progressed from there into smoking weed, hallucinogens, stuff like that. And for a long time, I managed to get straight A's and hide all that stuff, and it never seemed like there was anything wrong. I had a bout with an eating disorder when I was 17. I was hospitalized for that, and that was like my first experience with an institution. But still, I managed to make everything look like it was okay on the outside because I was always a good student, I was a good daughter, stuff like that. And I got married when I was 21, and I had my first child. Some of you guys met my kids last night. And for a couple of years, I didn't really do anything. I kind of got into the mom thing, and I worked at the hospital. I went to school. And it was while I worked at the hospital, my marriage got really, really bad. My ex-husband was very abusive and stuff, and by then I had Tyler, so I had 2 little boys at home. And I had my first experience with opiates because I was getting painkillers from the doctor, and I really, really liked it. And I didn't really think that there was anything wrong with it because I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't realize it was getting out of control for a while. And by then, I was already pretty caught up. And I still managed to keep my job for a couple more years after that, although I was drinking every night. And then I lost my job. And I remember when I got fired for not coming to work, because I was drinking all night long. And I remember being mad at them, thinking it wasn't my fault that I got fired. And then after that, I started working at bars and stuff, which really isn't a good spot for an addict. And a couple of bad relationships. I met somebody else. Jordan and Tyler by this time were in school. And I was managing to get them to school and stuff on time, but I was starting to be less and less of a mom and more caught up in doing drugs. And when they were, 8 and 6, they asked me if they could go live with their dad. And I remember being really pretty heartbroken. I don't remember identifying myself as an addict yet, although I was, shooting heroin. I don't know why I thought that was normal. But, I remember being really upset, but I let them go. because I wanted to use. And I had a little boy by then too. His name was Trey. He was a year and a half old. And his father and I, we used. That's what we did. And my mom took care of us pretty much. And finally my family stepped in. I think it was 2003. I went to detox for the first time. And I knew that there was something really wrong with me, but I wasn't really willing to admit it was the drugs yet. I stayed clean maybe for a couple of weeks, I think, and used again. And then the following year, I finally got arrested for the first time. I did a couple months in jail, and that's when I met Heather. I was clean maybe for a few months. I was going to meetings and stuff, but I didn't really want to do anything. I wouldn't identify myself with the people in the rooms. I separated myself as much as I could. Well, that has never happened to me. I haven't lost anything like that. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. So I took myself out of there, and I used for a while after that. Got arrested again, and when I got to the jail, I was pregnant with my youngest son, Joshua. I did 8 months in jail, and I really, that's when I started going to the H&I meetings in the jail, and I was starting to figure out that maybe there was something really wrong with me, I probably couldn't do drugs anymore, and I didn't stay clean though. I got out of there after I had my son, and I used that day. So that last 10 months that I was using were really, really bad. That's when I realized I really was powerless and I was using against my will, because I did not want to be using anymore. And my 2 youngest sons are with me. Jordan and Tyler were with their dad. I hadn't talked to them by then in probably a year. And I knew things were going to be really bad. And I remember thinking it would just be better if I died. I wasn't wanting to take my life, but I didn't want to live like that anymore. And I knew, I was on house arrest. I had, the state breathing down my neck. I knew that I was going to do a bunch of time if I didn't quit using, but I couldn't quit. No matter how bad I wanted to, I just could not quit. And my probation officer called me and asked me to come in. I did consider running because I've done that before. I had warrants and I ran from them, and then I'd finally get caught. But I was just so tired of it at that point that I didn't want to run anymore. And I went and turned myself in, and I got arrested. And I remember crying, and she said, "I don't know what else to do with you." And I really didn't have an answer for her. So September 2nd of 2008, that was that day. That's the last day that I used. And things were in really bad shape because CPS came and they took my 2 youngest kids from me. And I couldn't do anything about it, I was locked up. I wasn't getting out anytime soon. And I really started to think that it was probably better for those kids. So a couple months after I got in county jail, CPS came and talked to me, and I made the decision to voluntarily give those 2 little boys up for adoption. Trey was 5 and Joshua was 10 months old at the time. And then a week later I found out I had hepatitis from using a dirty needle. And things seemed really bad to me, but after I got through, about the first year, I had to go to court and give those kids up. That was probably the worst moment I've ever felt in my life, I think, because I had a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, but I still felt like it was probably the right decision for those kids at the time, and I still do, really. So when I got sentenced, my judge sentenced me to do a whole year in the county. I was really pissed off about that, because if anybody's done a year in county jail, that's a really long time to sit locked in. You can't go outside or anything. But looking back on it now, I do think that happened, God did that to me for a reason, because you can't really get your hands on any drugs in county, but once you get to DOC, they're everywhere. So by the time I got down there, the desire to use was gone. I didn't want to get high anymore. I knew that I could, but I chose to not be part of that lifestyle in there. And, I had somebody writing me, I had somebody sending me some NA stuff in the mail. I was able to go to a couple meetings a week in there, and I finally started to feel a little bit of hope. And there was somebody in there that brought me, a bag of heroin and put it in my hand. And that was the drug that ended up taking me down, and I loved it. But I remember looking at it and I was like, no, I don't want it. I don't want to do it anymore. And that was the first time in probably 20 years that I had finally had a little bit of faith and trust in my own self and my ability to make a choice and the ability to believe that something greater than me was going to help me get through this, So that day I was like, okay, you can do it. It's going to be okay. I had like 11 more months to do, and like Heather said, I went to a meeting the first day, and I was really embarrassed because people had seen me in meetings high and stuff, and I was ashamed of myself, but I knew if I didn't go to a meeting the day that I got released, I was going to be in big trouble. So, I went ahead and went to a meeting, and people were awesome to me. They were very welcoming. They hugged me. Everybody was really happy to see me. And from then on, I went to a meeting every day, probably for the first 2 years that I was clean, or 2 years after I got out of prison. I picked up a service position right away, which was making coffee at a meeting, and it just kept me accountable. And, I'm really pretty shy, so at first I was real quiet. And luckily for me, my sponsor and her husband, they invited me over to their house, and I've been going over to their house every Friday and Saturday night probably since then, since 2010. I got a good group of people around me, and I started working steps right away because I was pretty terrified of myself because my past history had shown me that I didn't make very good choices, So I took the coffee making position, went to meetings every day, started to get to know people. And it was really hard for me at first, too, because I didn't trust anybody. I didn't think that anybody... I really didn't, I kind of didn't believe in this at first, like the whole everybody being so happy and stuff. I didn't think that it was true. I was like, what? Are some of these people still high? But they weren't, obviously. And I decided to go through treatment for the hepatitis thing, too. After I got out, I was in a study. And I was a little scared of that, too, because I read up on it before I did it, and I knew that it was probably going to make me a little crazy and maybe make me want to use, but I prayed really hard every day. I went to a meeting every day. I talked about what I was going through, and I got through that, too, and I've been hepatitis-free since 2011. My main thing that I had to start doing from the very time I walked out of prison, or even in prison, was like fight against fear, because I've realized now that most of my bad decisions and bad choices were based on fear, from the time I was a little kid. I always felt funny or different than other people. I was always very shy, and in the family I grew up in, because there was alcoholism and abuse going on, I was taught to hide things and not talk about them, and that's probably been the biggest thing too about my recovery. I've had to learn how to do is be honest. I was taught to lie really early on, and fighting against that lying thing at first is really hard. Because even like when I got out of prison, I would still want to lie. I don't know where that was coming from, but like somebody would call me and I'd be at Walgreens and I'd want to tell them I was at CVS. Why do I want to say that? It doesn't make any sense. So I had to keep working against that because the automatic lie would come in my head. But I'm really lucky. Heather's awesome. She's never ever judged me or been mean to me. She'll tell me how it is, but not in a mean way. She's very kind and loving. I think our personalities fit because, especially at first, I was kind of angry and abrasive, and she's not, She was always very loving. I had a problem, too, at first, having to always be right about everything. And, I would argue and argue and argue and just want the other person to tell me that I was right. Like I knew I was right, but I wanted them to say it, And I had to work on that really hard, too, because who cares if I'm right? That doesn't really matter anymore. I don't want to be right, I just want to be okay now. And, then Scott K talked me into taking the entertainment position for South Shore, and I didn't know how detailed that was going to be, plus I didn't know what I was doing. But I love that position. This is the third year that I've done it now, but at first I was so panicky. Picnic was supposed to start at noon, and I'd be out there setting up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, waiting for everybody to get there. I don't do that anymore. Now I'm okay with it. I've got it down pat now, but so I've been doing service work the whole time too, and that's very important. Working the steps, service work, and talking to your sponsor are the 3 things that you have to do if you want to make it and stay alive. And you got to be honest with your sponsor too. You can't just call them and tell them some bullshit. You got to tell them what's really going on. I've gotten a lot of courage back from working the steps and stuff, and I started to believe in myself. I started school a couple of years ago. My 2 youngest boys, they were adopted by the same family, and this thing happened to me when I was in hepatitis treatment. I was really, really sick one time from it, and I had to go to the emergency room. and I had been praying about my little boys because I hadn't heard anything about them in a couple of years by then, and I just wanted to make sure that I knew they were okay. There really was no way to do that, though. And I always wondered about who was raising them and stuff, and I got sick that day. I went to the emergency room. I was there all day. When I got there, I told them I was in recovery because I didn't want them to give me any narcotics or anything, and I sat there all day, and I was really kind of out of it because, I was having some problems with my red blood count and stuff. And when I was getting ready to leave, they said the doctor wanted to talk to me, so he came in and he was holding my hand and he was talking to me and he was like, "How long have you been clean?" I told him, and he said, "That's really good. I'm glad that you're, you're doing this." And he was talking to me. He knew the doctor that was taking care of me, and he probably talked to me for about 10 minutes. And he told me a couple jokes. He was real funny, and he left. And then I left, and I looked at his name, and he's the guy that adopted my kids. And I didn't know that until I left. He knew who I was. So after that, I really seriously had like a really good sense of peace because he was a good man, I could tell, And, I was getting a little impatient about seeing my two older boys because by the time, 2011, I hadn't seen them since 2007. Christmas Eve that year, I was on Facebook and my youngest son, Tyler, all of a sudden this little message popped up and it said, "Hi, Mommy," and I hadn't talked to him in a long time, and man, I freaked out. I was like, "Hi, what are you doing?" And he called me. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. Their dad did not want me to see him, which I understood that, and I kept praying about it and thought if I just be patient, things are going to work out. If I keep praying, do what I'm supposed to do, things will be okay. I started seeing them again in 2012, and they moved in with me again now in February. And so it really does work. I believed that. I started to believe that things would work out. I really did know that things were going to be okay. But man, they work out way beyond what you think they're gonna, what's gonna happen. Because I had no hope for a long time, and then I started to get a little bit of hope. Things started to happen. Like I said, I've been in school for a couple years now. I have my children back in my life, and they love me and they forgive me. They don't hold anything against me, really. I'm truly blessed for that. Because they could hate me, and they don't. They love to be with me, and I love it because they wanted to come here. They love all my friends, and my mother, that's kind of part of the story too, because she's mentally ill, and she has been since I was a child, but she has long periods where she's fine, normal, functional. And she's really the only person that stuck by me when I was using, and then, the 2 years that I was in prison, she made sure that I got letters, and she called me, I could call her and stuff, and she really did stick by me. And now she's really, really, really sick. And, all this stuff changed at once. The kids moved in with me in February. My mom lives with me. Then she started to get sick. And, I've never had to deal with one of her nervous breakdown things clean, really. And so this time has been hard because she's been sick on and off since January. And since I've been here, Friday, she's not okay. They took her off a bunch of her medicine. And Friday I had to come here and I had to make the decision whether I was going to come or stay with her. But I had to finally ask my aunt and somebody else for help because I can't do this by myself, obviously. And I need this. I needed to come here. I need to have the fellowship and restore my serenity. And these are the kinds of things I look forward to, I do know things are going to be okay with my mom, regardless of what happens, because I've got a lot of support and I got a lot of people that love me. But if you could say a prayer for her, that'd be awesome. Also, in December, Lori, my boss, she doesn't like when I call her that, but she's here somewhere, I don't see her. She asked me to send a resume in to work in substance abuse at Indiana State Prison. And a few years ago, I would have thought there was no way that I could do that, because I just got out of prison in the state of Indiana in 2010. But I sent the resume, and they gave me a job there in March. And like the first couple times I had to go there, I was like, are they gonna let me leave? I was scared. And that stayed like that for a while. I was like the first month I was working there, I'd be in I have an office. I can't believe that either. I've never had an office before. So I was in there, I'll be sitting in my office, and for the first few weeks I kept feeling like somebody was gonna come in and be like, put your hands behind your back. Like, so I had to get used to that stuff too. But that's awesome too. I get to work, with a bunch of guys that are struggling. Sometimes it's a little bit heartbreaking because they can use in there, and I know what it feels like not to be able to stop using. But my recovery so far has been all about, I do try to help other people. And I didn't care about other people before, so I realized the changes in myself too, because a few years ago I was still kind of hard. I didn't like to cry. I didn't like to show anybody how I felt, and now the exact opposite's true. I cry all the time. I told my sponsor last year, I was like crying about I don't even know what, and I said, oh my God, I said, recovery's turning me into a big fat pussy, But everything makes me, I'm glad though that I can feel any kind of emotion, I love it. Sometimes it's still not totally comfortable for me, but, one of the first people I met too in the program was Tim Goad, and he had just gotten out of prison too, so we bonded kinda, and although I know he can be kind of a jerk, he's really been a good friend to me. I mean, he can, we've had some really bad arguments and fights too, but Tim's pretty awesome. He's been real supportive, And then also, relationships haven't been a very good area for me either my whole life, really. And I think that God decided to teach me some tolerance and patience when he had me meet Jason. But I can say too, Jason, that I'm real grateful I have you in my life too, because you've taught me how to be, like a good girlfriend and stuff, and considerate and kind and all that stuff that I wasn't before. But it has taken a lot of patience. There's some other people. Oh, and I got Stacy and Jesse P out of that too, so that's kind of good because they kind of, I love you, Stacy, wherever you're at out there. You've been a big, important person to me too, very supportive. If you're new and you're struggling, or if you're not new and you're struggling, don't leave, because this truly is a miracle. It really is. That I've been even given the opportunity to have any kind of life. I never imagined that my life could be like this, because I'm pretty much, happy all the time. I have some bad moments still, but, I'm pretty peaceful and happy most of the time. And I was never like that before. And I don't feel like I always got to be right. Like I said, I feel like everybody's got something to teach me, all the people I meet here. I'm really grateful you guys even asked me to speak. I'm still a little nervous, but it's not too bad, I feel like I just needed to get up here and tell you guys my story. There is hope. Sometimes I wish that I see people struggle, and I wish I could trade places with them just for, like half a day, so they could feel the feeling I have inside, versus the feeling I used to have. Because there's a big difference, to feel like your heart open up, and to honestly care about other people, and to accept love too, because you have to be willing to accept what people are trying to give you in here. And there's some real genuine people here, I've learned to trust people again. I used to have a hard time listening to everybody, but I love it now. I listen to everything everybody says. Somebody with no clean time, somebody with a little clean time in the meetings, Everybody's got something to teach me, or something I needed to hear that day, These kind of camp outs, this is the third year I've been here, and it's awesome that we all can come here and we're all alike. That's the thing. I realize I don't have that many differences. I have a lot of similarities to everybody here now. Rather than separating myself, I can identify with everybody in this room, I really think that's all I got to say.
Thanks, Britt. Britt, that was wonderful. Well, hope you guys enjoyed the convention. I know I did. If you guys want to... Not over yet. All right, enjoy the evening, have fun tomorrow morning, that kind of thing. Let's circle up and hug.